What if the school bully picked on the wrong girl, one with a connection so powerful it could change everything? This story follows Alara Drackle, a quiet new student with high-functioning autism who becomes the target of Cashin Thorne, the most feared guy in school. He thinks she's weak, an easy victim. But what he doesn't know is that Alara has a secret, one that will turn the tables in the most unexpected way. Stay until the end, because what begins with a bully's arrogance will end with his downfall. If you hate bullies and manipulators, subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. There are predators who hunt by sight, and predators who hunt by smell. Cashin Thorne hunted by instinct, scanning for weakness, for difference, for anyone who didn't fit the carefully maintained pattern of Ravenscroft Academy. And Alara Drackle, on her first morning navigating the marble hallways, knew she was exactly the kind of prey he was looking for. The hallway was an assault on her senses. Fluorescent lights hummed at a frequency most students couldn't hear, but to Alara it felt like wasps trapped inside her skull. Voices overlapped in a cacophony: laughter, gossip, the sharp snap of locker doors, the squeak of expensive shoes on polished floors. She clutched her schedule in one hand, her other hand pressed flat against the cool wall, using the solid surface to ground herself as she counted her breaths. 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out. Stay invisible. Blend in. Survive. She moved with deliberate precision, each step measured, her posture straight despite the chaos pressing in from all sides. She had made it halfway down the main corridor when she saw them. Cashin Thorne and his 2 friends stood near the marble staircase like sentinels guarding a gate. They weren't loud like the other students. They didn't need to be. Power, Alara had learned, was often quietest right before it struck. Cashin said something low, and one of his friends smirked, their eyes scanning the crowd with casual arrogance. Alara calculated the distance. She could take the side hallway, avoid them entirely, be late to her first class, but maintain her goal of invisibility. Her fingers tightened on her schedule. Then Cashin's gaze locked onto her. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. His were pale blue, cold, and assessing. Alara looked away immediately, adjusting her grip on her backpack, and kept walking. Don't engage. Don't react. Don't. The collision was sudden and deliberate. Cashin's shoulder slammed into hers with enough force to send her stumbling sideways. Her specialized noise-canceling earbuds flew from her hand, clattering across the marble. Her leather-bound journal, the one she used to track patterns and manage her thoughts, skidded under a nearby locker. Students nearby stopped, some turning to watch, others pretending not to notice. Alara stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest, every muscle locked in place. "Whoa," Cashin said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Sorry about that. Didn't see you there." His friends chuckled, the sound sharp and cruel. She bent down slowly, methodically collecting her things. Her hands didn't shake. She wouldn't allow them to. "You walk kind of weird, you know that?" Cashin continued, leaning against the railing, arms crossed. "Real stiff. Like a robot or something." He tilted his head, his smirk widening. "You okay? Or are you just odd?" Alara straightened, clutching her journal against her chest. She met his gaze for precisely 2 seconds, long enough to acknowledge his existence, short enough to deny him satisfaction, and then turned and walked away, her footsteps perfectly even, her expression carefully blank. Behind her, she heard one of his friends laugh. "Dude, I think you broke her." Cashin's voice followed her down the hallway. "Yeah, this is going to be fun." Alara's fingers tightened on her journal until her knuckles went white. He had no idea what he'd just started. Alara made it through first period by focusing on the grain of the wooden desk beneath her fingers, tracing the subtle patterns while the teacher's voice became background noise she could filter and categorize. Second period was worse. Chemistry, with its overwhelming mix of smells that made her stomach turn. But she survived by breathing through her mouth and sitting near the window. By third period, she had almost convinced herself that Cashin Thorne would lose interest. She was wrong. She was walking through the senior courtyard toward the library, a route she'd mapped that morning specifically because it avoided the main hallways, when she heard footsteps behind her. Not the casual shuffle of students changing classes. These were purposeful. Tracking.
Hey.
Robot girl. Alara's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. The courtyard was nearly empty, most students already in class. The late bell would ring in 2 minutes. She could make it to the library, to witnesses, to safety. I'm talking to you. She walked faster. Then she felt it, a hand clamping down on her backpack, yanking her backward with enough force that she stumbled, her carefully maintained balance shattered. The world tilted. Her shoulder hit the brick wall of the courtyard, and for a moment, everything was too loud, too sharp, too much. Alara stopped breathing. Slowly, with the kind of control that came from years of managing a body that didn't always cooperate with a world not built for it, she straightened. She turned around. Cashin stood less than 2 feet away, his hand still gripping the strap of her backpack, that same infuriating smirk on his face. His 2 friends flanked him, watching with the lazy interest of people who had seen this performance before and knew how it ended. "What's your problem?" Cashin asked, his voice carrying that edge of mock confusion that Bullies perfected. "I'm just trying to be friendly. You keep walking away like you're too good to talk to me." Alara met his gaze.
She didn't blink, didn't look away,
didn't fidget or shift her weight or show any of the signs that people like Cashin had been trained to read as submission. She just stared at him with the same cold, analytical focus she used to study patterns, except now, he was the pattern. And she was categorizing every weakness. The smirk on Cashin's face faltered. Just slightly. Just for a second. "You shouldn't have done that," Alara said quietly.
Her voice was calm.
Flat. The kind of quiet that made people lean in to hear, except Cashin didn't lean in. He tensed. "What?" He tried to laugh, but it came out forced. "What did you just say to me?" Alara didn't answer. She just kept staring at him, her dark eyes unblinking, her expression completely neutral. Behind Cashin, one of his friends shifted uncomfortably. The courtyard felt colder. The shadows from the Gothic arches above seemed to stretch longer, deeper. "I asked you a question," Cashin said, his voice harder now, trying to regain control of the moment. "What's your deal? Why shouldn't I have done that?" Silence. Alara's gaze didn't waver, didn't soften. There was something in her eyes that didn't belong in a 17-year-old girl, something ancient and patient and utterly unbothered by his posturing. It was the look of a predator who had already calculated every move and found them all inadequate. Cashin's hand loosened on her backpack. "You're a freak," he muttered, but the words lacked bite. He was unsettled. She could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his breathing had changed.
"Good."
Alara pulled her backpack free with one smooth motion, adjusted the straps with precise movements, and turned away. She walked toward the library with the same measured steps, her posture straight, her pace unhurried. She didn't look back.
Didn't need to.
Behind her, she heard one of Cashin's friends whisper, "Dude, what the hell was that?" Cashin's response was too quiet to hear, but Alara could imagine the bravado, the dismissive laugh, the insistence that she was nothing. Just some weird new girl. He would convince himself of that.
He would need to.
And then he would come for her again. Alara's fingers brushed against a small obsidian pendant hidden beneath her shirt, cold against her skin. Let him come. Alara knew they would be waiting for her. The Gothic library cast long shadows across the cobblestone path as the afternoon sun dipped behind the old bell tower. Most students had already left campus, gone to sports practice, or driven home in their expensive cars. But Cashin Thorne was patient when it came to asserting dominance. And he had been humiliated twice now by a girl who refused to play by his rules. She saw them as soon as she rounded the corner. Cashin and his 2 friends, positioned deliberately between her and the main gate. The library loomed behind them, all dark stone and pointed arches, its shadow swallowing the path whole. Alara stopped walking. There she is, Cashin said, pushing off from the stone wall where he'd been leaning. The weird girl who thinks she's too good to talk to people. His friends spread out slightly, blocking her retreat. This wasn't a hallway encounter. This was planned. Escalated. What's your problem? Cashin continued, walking toward her with that easy confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences. You think you're better than everyone? Think you can just ignore me and walk away? Alara stood perfectly still, her hand moving to grip the strap of her backpack. I'm talking to you, Cashin said, stopping just inches from her. Why don't you ever answer? What, are you too stupid? Too broken? He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper. Or, are you just a freak who doesn't know how to be normal? One of his friends laughed nervously. The sound echoed off the stone walls. Alara lifted her gaze to meet Cashin's, and for the third time, she saw that flicker of unease cross his face. But he was committed now. Too far in to back down. You have no idea who I am, Alara whispered. Cashin's smirk widened. Yeah? Then why don't you? Alara's hand moved to her chest, her fingers closing around the small obsidian pendant hidden beneath her shirt. The temperature dropped. Not gradually. Not like a breeze or a passing cloud. It plummeted, a sudden, brutal cold that turned breath to mist and froze the moisture in the air. Cashin's words died in his throat. The shadows beneath the Gothic arches deepened, stretching and writhing like living things. And then he was there. Lord Alistair Drackle didn't arrive. He simply existed where he had not existed a moment before, stepping from the deepest shadow near the library's entrance, as if the darkness itself had given him form. He was tall, impossibly still, dressed in black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His presence was wrong in a way that bypassed rational thought and struck directly at the most primitive parts of the brain, the parts that knew, instinctively, when something apex was near. The air itself felt heavier, colder,
Predatory.
Cashin stumbled backward, his face draining of all color. His smirk vaporized, replaced by something raw and primal. His hands trembled. One of his friends made a sound, half gasp, half whimper, and took 3 stuttering steps back. Lord Drackle's eyes, ancient, glacial, utterly devoid of mercy, fixed on Cashin. The boy who had ruled Ravenscroft Academy with cruelty and charisma stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to run, but his legs refused to obey. Alara, Lord Drackle said, his voice quiet and perfectly controlled. Get in the car. Alara walked forward, passing within inches of Cashin. He didn't move. Couldn't move. She paused beside her father, then glanced back at Cashin one final time. His eyes were wide with naked terror, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Now you know, she said softly. Then she disappeared into the shadow, where her father waited. The car was a black Mercedes that sat idling at the edge of the courtyard, so dark it seemed to drink in the fading light. Alara had never seen it arrive. Her father didn't need conventional transportation, but he maintained the appearance for moments like this, when witnesses needed a rational explanation for the impossible. Lord Drackle opened the rear door with a gesture so slight it was almost imperceptible. Alara slid into the leather interior, the warmth inside a stark contrast to the frozen air outside. Her father followed, settling beside her with a kind of supernatural grace that made every human movement seem clumsy by comparison. The driver, one of her father's oldest servants, pulled away from the curb without a word. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Alara stared out the window, watching Ravenscroft Academy disappear behind them. She could still see Cashin's face in her mind, frozen in terror, all his cruel confidence stripped away in an instant. You let them corner you, Lord Drackle said finally. His voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it, not anger, exactly, but something colder. Disappointment, perhaps. 3 human children.
Weak.
Insignificant. Alara's jaw tightened. I had it under control. Did you? He turned to look at her, his ancient eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. You're my daughter, Alara. You carry the blood of kings. And yet you allow human vermin to put their hands on you. To mock you. To make you feel small.
He paused.
Why? Alara met his gaze. Because I was waiting. For what? Permission? There was no warmth in his voice. You don't need my intervention to handle children. I wasn't waiting for you, Alara said quietly. I was waiting for the right moment. Lord Drackle studied her, his expression unreadable. Explain. Alara turned back to the window. Cassian Thorne is predictable. He's spent his entire life being told he's exceptional, that he's untouchable. People like that, they don't learn from small defeats. They dismiss them, rationalize them.
She paused.
But real fear? The kind that reaches into your chest and wraps around your heart? That stays. A ghost of something, approval, maybe, flickered across her father's face. He needed to see, Alara continued, to understand that the world is bigger and darker than his small kingdom, that there are consequences he can't buy or charm his way out of. She glanced at her father. You taught me that patience is a weapon, that the most devastating strikes are the ones your enemy never sees coming. Lord Drackle was silent for a moment. Then he leaned back against the seat, the tension in the car easing slightly. You have my mind, he said finally. Strategic, patient, ruthless when necessary. He looked at her. But you also have your mother's heart. Don't let it make you hesitate when action is required. I won't, Alara said. Good. Lord Drackle's eyes gleamed in the darkness. Because that boy will not stop. His pride is wounded. His control is shattered. He will come for you again. Alara's fingers brushed the obsidian pendant at her throat. I know, she said softly. I'm counting on it. The car was a black Mercedes that sat idling at the edge of the courtyard, so dark it seemed to drink in the fading light. Alara had never seen it arrive. Her father didn't need conventional transportation, but he maintained the appearance for moments like this, when witnesses needed a rational explanation for the impossible. Lord Drackle opened the rear door with a gesture so slight it was almost imperceptible. Alara slid into the leather interior, the warmth inside a stark contrast to the frozen air outside. Her father followed, settling beside her with a kind of supernatural grace that made every human movement seem clumsy by comparison. The driver, one of her father's oldest servants, pulled away from the curb without a word. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Alara stared out the window, watching Ravenscroft Academy disappear behind them. She could still see Cassian's face in her mind, frozen in terror, all his cruel confidence stripped away in an instant. You let them corner you, Lord Drackle said finally. His voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it, not anger, exactly, but something colder. Disappointment, perhaps. 3 human children.
Weak.
Insignificant. Alara's jaw tightened. I had it under control. Did you? He turned to look at her, his ancient eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. You're my daughter, Alara. You carry the blood of kings. And yet you allow human vermin to put their hands on you. To mock you. To make you feel small.
He paused.
Why? Alara met his gaze. Because I was waiting. For what? Permission? There was no warmth in his voice. You don't need my intervention to handle children. I wasn't waiting for you, Alara said quietly. I was waiting for the right moment. Lord Drackle studied her, his expression unreadable. Explain. Alara turned back to the window. Cassian Thorne is predictable. He's spent his entire life being told he's exceptional, that he's untouchable. People like that, they don't learn from small defeats. They dismiss them, rationalize them.
She paused.
But real fear? The kind that reaches into your chest and wraps around your heart? That stays. A ghost of something, approval, maybe, flickered across her father's face. He needed to see, Alara continued, to understand that the world is bigger and darker than his small kingdom, that there are consequences he can't buy or charm his way out of. She glanced at her father. You taught me that patience is a weapon, that the most devastating strikes are the ones your enemy never sees coming. Lord Drackle was silent for a moment. Then he leaned back against the seat, the tension in the car easing slightly. You have my mind, he said finally. Strategic, patient, ruthless when necessary. He looked at her. But you also have your mother's heart. Don't let it make you hesitate when action is required. I won't, Alara said. Good. Lord Drackle's eyes gleamed in the darkness. Because that boy will not stop. His pride is wounded. His control is shattered. He will come for you again. Alara's fingers brushed the obsidian pendant at her throat. I know, she said softly. I'm counting on it. Alara arrived at Ravenscroft Academy the next morning with a strategy crystallized in her mind like frost on glass. She had spent the evening in her father's study, surrounded by centuries-old books on strategy and human psychology, distilling her approach down to a single principle: never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. I'm going to let him dig his own grave, she had told her father over breakfast. Lord Drackle had merely nodded, a thin smile crossing his lips. Then hand him a bigger shovel. The school was already buzzing when she walked through the front entrance. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as she passed. Eyes tracked her movement. The whispers were louder today, less careful. Saw him yesterday? Her uncle or something. Cashin's face. I swear he almost. Never seen anyone that scary. Rich family. Has to be. Alara kept her expression neutral, but she catalogued every word, every reaction. The story had already morphed, as stories do. Her father transformed from ancient vampire king to mysterious, terrifying uncle with unclear but obviously immense power. Close enough to the truth to serve her purposes. She made it halfway to her locker when Cashin's friends appeared. Without Cashin himself, interesting. He was regrouping, reassessing. But his lieutenant still had orders to maintain the hierarchy, to prove that yesterday's incident was an aberration, not a shift in power. The taller one, a lacrosse player named Justin, moved to intercept her path while the other, Marcus, circled behind. The hallway was crowded enough for witnesses, but contained enough for plausible deniability. Classic intimidation formation. Justin's foot shot out as Alara approached, a clumsy attempt to trip her disguised as an accident. She saw it 3 steps before it happened. The shift in his weight, the calculation in his eyes, the predictable trajectory. Alara stopped walking exactly 1 inch before his extended foot. She looked down at his shoe, then slowly raised her gaze to meet his eyes. The hallway noise dimmed as students nearby stopped to watch. Interesting, Alara said, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Her tone was clinical, detached, as if she were observing a specimen under glass. You're employing the same dominance behavior primates use in the wild. Physical obstruction as a demonstration of territorial control. She paused, tilting her head slightly. The problem is that behavior only works when the target perceives you as a legitimate threat. Otherwise, it's just sad. A few students nearby made sounds, half gasps, half suppressed laughs. Justin's face flushed red. What did you just call me? I didn't call you anything, Alara replied calmly. I simply observed that you're exhibiting behaviors common to species with limited cognitive capacity. It's not an insult. It's biology. She stepped around his foot with precise movement. Though I suppose the fact that you took it as an insult is telling. The murmur that rippled through the hallway was unmistakable. Several students openly laughed. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," with delighted shock. Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tight. You think you're smart? I don't think, Alara said, meeting his gaze with that same unblinking intensity. I know. And more importantly, so does everyone else here. She glanced around the hallway at the students watching with fascinated attention, including Cashin, which is why he sent you instead of coming himself. The words landed like a blade between ribs. Justin and Marcus exchanged a look, uncertain, rattled. The social calculus was shifting in real time. Every second they stood there, unable to respond, was another crack in the foundation of power Cashin had built. "Where is he, by the way?" Alara asked, her voice almost gentle. "Still recovering from yesterday? I imagine it takes time to process that kind of fear. The body holds on to trauma in interesting ways." "He's not afraid of you," Marcus spat, but his voice wavered. Alara smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Then why are you here instead of him?" Silence. She walked past them both, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. Behind her, the whispers erupted, louder now, emboldened. Cashin's control was cracking, and Alara had barely begun. Alara found the graffiti before second period. Someone had taken a black permanent marker to her locker, scrawling words across the gunmetal gray surface in jagged, angry letters. "Freak. Retard. Go back where you came from." The vandalism was crude, desperate, the kind of retaliation that came from someone losing control of the narrative. A small crowd had gathered, some students watching with uncomfortable silence, others whispering behind their hands. Alara could feel their eyes on her, waiting for a reaction.
Tears, maybe.
Anger.
Fear.
Anything that would confirm she was breakable. She gave them nothing. Alara set her backpack down with careful precision, opened the side pocket, and retrieved the small cleaning kit she always carried: wet wipes, hand sanitizer, a microfiber cloth. Then, with the same methodical focus she applied to everything, she began to clean. The marker didn't come off easily. She had to scrub, applying consistent pressure, working in small circular motions. Students began to drift away, the spectacle less interesting without the emotional payoff they'd expected. A few looked uncomfortable. One girl, a junior Alara vaguely recognized from her English class, started to approach, then thought better of it and walked away. Alara worked in silence, her breathing steady, her movements precise. She didn't hurry, didn't hide. She simply erased Cashin's desperation one stroke at a time. By lunch, the locker was clean. The cafeteria was its usual controlled chaos, the social hierarchy made visible through seating arrangements and carefully maintained territories. Alara had claimed a small table near the windows, away from the center where Cashin and his inner circle held court. She was halfway through her lunch, reading a book on behavioral psychology, when she heard the footsteps approaching. She didn't look up. "Must be nice." Cashin's voice cut through the ambient noise, loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "Having a rich daddy who can show up and scare people for you." Alara turned a page. "What? Not talking today?" Cashin continued, his two friends flanking him. Several students at adjacent tables had stopped eating, watching. "That's fine.
I'll talk."
"See, I've been thinking about your mysterious uncle. Or daddy. Or whoever that was." He leaned against her table. "Must be embarrassing, needing your family to fight your battles." Alara placed her bookmark carefully, closed the book, and finally looked up. Her gaze was level, unflinching, and completely calm. "It's funny," she said quietly, her voice carrying just far enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You keep bringing up my father like you're not the one who almost lost control of his bladder when he saw him." The cafeteria seemed to freeze. Cashin's face went white, then red. "I wasn't. You were trembling," Alara continued in that same factual, clinical tone. "Visible tremor in your hands. Rapid, shallow breathing. Dilated pupils. Classic acute fear response." She tilted her head slightly. Marcus noticed. Justin noticed. "I'm fairly certain half the soccer team heard about it by third period yesterday." One of Cashin's friends shifted uncomfortably. A girl at the next table covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. I wasn't scared, Cashin insisted, but his voice had lost its edge. He sounded defensive now.
Desperate.
Of course not, Alara said, her tone almost sympathetic. That's why you sent your friends to trip me this morning instead of approaching me yourself. That's why you vandalized my locker with slurs instead of saying them to my face. That's why you're standing 3 feet away from me right now instead of closer. She paused. Because you're not afraid. Cashin's jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists. You're nothing, he hissed. You're a weird, broken. Careful, Alara interrupted softly. You're making it worse. The cafeteria had gone completely silent now. Everyone was watching. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a public execution of Cashin's carefully constructed persona. He stood there, caught between the instinct to escalate and the growing realization that every word was digging him deeper. His face was flushed, his breathing uneven. He looked like a child throwing a tantrum, not the king of the school. Finally, he turned and walked away, his friends scrambling to follow. The silence broke into immediate, buzzing conversation. Alara opened her book and continued reading as if nothing had happened. But under the table, her hand rested against the obsidian pendant, and she allowed herself the smallest smile. Alara found Cashin waiting for her after 6th period, alone this time, leaning against the stone wall near the arts building where the hallways branched into quiet corridors rarely traveled between classes. No friends, no audience, just him, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes carrying something different than before, not arrogance, but something rawer. Confusion, maybe, or the beginning of genuine fear. She stopped walking but didn't speak. Why don't you fight back? Cashin asked. His voice was low, stripped of its usual performative confidence. You just take it. Let me say whatever I want. Do whatever I want. Why? Alara studied him for a moment, her head tilting slightly as if he were a puzzle she was solving in real time. Because I don't need to, she said finally. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Alara shifted her backpack, her movements deliberate. People like you're predictable. You operate from a position of perceived power, but that power is fragile. It's built on fear and reputation, which means it requires constant maintenance, constant performance.
She paused.
And performances always have flaws. Cashin's jaw clenched. I'm not performing. You are. Every moment of every day. Alara's voice remained calm, clinical. You surround yourself with people who validate you. You target anyone who doesn't fit the pattern because difference threatens the illusion of your control. You escalate when challenged because backing down would expose the truth. What truth? That you're not special. You're not untouchable. You're just a boy who's terrified of being ordinary. Alara took a single step forward, and Cashin instinctively stepped back. So, when someone like me arrives, someone who doesn't react the way you expect, who doesn't give you the fear or admiration you've been conditioned to receive, you don't know what to do. Your script fails. And instead of adapting, you double down. You escalate. You make mistakes. Cashin's hands curled into fists. I haven't made any mistakes. You've made nothing but mistakes. Alara's gaze was unwavering. You cornered me in front of witnesses. You vandalized my locker where cameras could see. You publicly mocked me in the cafeteria and gave me ammunition. Every action you've taken has weakened your position while strengthening mine. You think you're so smart. I don't think. I observe. I calculate. I wait. Alara's voice dropped lower. Because people like you always destroy themselves. I don't need to fight back. I just need to let you keep talking, keep acting, keep proving to everyone around you that your power was always an illusion. Cashin's face flushed red. You don't know anything about me. I know exactly what you are. And more importantly, I know what you're afraid of. Alara paused, letting the silence stretch. You're not afraid of me. You're not even afraid of my father. You're afraid of being irrelevant. Of the moment when people stop paying attention, stop caring, stop seeing you as important. She tilted her head. That's already happening, by the way. I've watched the shift. Your friends hesitate now before they laugh. Students don't move out of your way as quickly. The teachers look at you differently. That's not. It is. Alara's tone was almost gentle. And the harder you fight it, the faster it accelerates. Because desperation is even less attractive than cruelty. Cashin stood frozen, his breathing uneven, his entire body radiating impotent rage, with nowhere to direct it. Alara adjusted her backpack and walked past him. Wait, Cashin started. No, Alara said without turning around. She left him standing alone in the empty hallway and didn't look back. Alara found her father in his study that evening, surrounded by shadows and the scent of old leather and older blood. Lord Drackle sat behind a mahogany desk that had witnessed the fall of empires, reading a first edition that predated the printing press by several centuries. He didn't look up when she entered, but his fingers paused on the age-worn page. You've been busy, he said. Alara closed the door behind her and moved to the chair across from his desk. I got in his head. I know. The school has been abuzz with conversation. Lord Drackle finally looked up, his ancient eyes studying his daughter with the same analytical precision she had inherited from him. The boy is unraveling. Yes. And yet he persists. Her father closed the book with a soft thud. Wounded animals are the most dangerous, Alara. Pride makes men foolish, but humiliation makes them reckless. I know. Do you? Lord Drackle leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Because I could end this tonight. One conversation with his father. One carefully placed word in the right ear. The Thorne family would withdraw their son from Ravenscroft by morning, and you would never see him again. Alara met her father's gaze steadily.
No. No.
I don't want you to end it. She leaned forward slightly. I want him to end it himself. A slow smile crossed Lord Drackle's face, the kind that had terrified kings and generals for 1,000 years. Explain. Cashin Thorne has spent his entire life being protected from consequences. His family's money, his father's influence, his own charm, they've all been shields. He's never had to face the real cost of his actions. Alara's voice was calm but purposeful. If you intervene, if you remove him, he learns nothing. He becomes a victim in his own narrative. Someone else did this to him. Someone more powerful. It wasn't his fault. And that bothers you? It's inefficient. Alara's fingers traced the arm of her chair. But if he destroys himself, if his own desperation and poor judgment create the consequences, then the lesson is permanent. He'll carry it for the rest of his life. Lord Drackle was silent for a long moment, his eyes gleaming with something that might have been pride. You truly are my daughter, he said finally. Ruthless when it matters. Patient when others would strike. He paused. How close is he to breaking? Very close. Alara saw it in her mind, the fraying edges of Cashin's control, the desperation in his eyes during their last confrontation, the way his hands had trembled with impotent rage. He's isolated now. His friends are uncertain. His reputation is crumbling. He needs to reassert dominance, but every move he makes weakens him further. A death spiral. Exactly. Alara stood, moving to the window where Ravenscroft Academy sat in the distance, its Gothic spires dark against the twilight sky. He's going to make one final play. Something big. Something desperate. And when he does? Alara's reflection smiled in the glass, cold and certain. I'll be ready. Lord Drackle rose from his desk and joined his daughter at the window. Together they stood in comfortable silence, two apex predators watching their territory. How long? He asked. Alara touched the obsidian pendant at her throat. Soon, she whispered. Very soon. Alara knew something had changed the moment she stepped through Ravenscroft's entrance. The energy in the hallway was electric, charged with the kind of chaotic excitement that only came from scandal. Students clustered in tight groups, phones out, voices overlapping in urgent whispers. Several turned to look at her as she passed, their expressions a mixture of shock and something else, respect, maybe, or fear. She followed the current of bodies toward the senior hallway. A crowd had formed around Cashin's locker, 50 students at least, pressed together, craning to see. Some were taking photos. Others were reading something on their phones, faces lit with disbelief. The whispers were a constant hum, words tumbling over each other in delicious chaos. His dad embezzled from the scholarship fund. 12 families lost everything. Evidence of tax fraud going back 5 years. The FBI is involved. Alara moved through the crowd with quiet efficiency, students parting to let her pass. She reached the front and saw what had drawn them. Printed documents were taped across Cashin's locker in neat rows, bank statements, email exchanges, legal correspondence. Each one damning. Each one authentic. The evidence was irrefutable. Richard Thorne, Cashin's father and a respected member of Ravenscroft's Board of Trustees, had systematically embezzled from the school's scholarship fund. Families who had trusted him with their children's futures had been robbed. The money had funded the Thornes' lifestyle, the cars, the vacation home, Cashin's college fund. Everything they were had been built on stolen dreams. A commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. Students scattered as Cashin shoved through, his face chalk-white, eyes wild. He stopped in front of his locker, staring at the evidence plastered across it like his family's sins made manifest. His hands trembled as he reached for the papers. Then he turned and saw Alara standing there, arms crossed, expression neutral. "You did this," he hissed, lunging toward her. 2 students grabbed his arms, holding him back. "You fucking did this." Alara didn't flinch. She simply looked at him with those same dark, analytical eyes that had unnerved him from the beginning. "I didn't do anything," she said quietly. "Your father did this. You just benefited from it." "Liar." Cashin's voice cracked. "You're trying to destroy me." "No, Cashin." Alara's tone was almost gentle. "I think this makes you exactly who you are. The only difference is now everyone else sees it too." The crowd murmured, phones still recording. Cashin stood frozen, his chest heaving, tears of rage and humiliation threatening to spill. Every eye in the hallway was on him, not with fear or admiration, but with disgust and pity. His kingdom, his power, his carefully constructed identity, all of it crumbling in real time. He ripped the papers from his locker, tearing them in impotent fury, and stormed down the hallway. Students moved out of his way, but not out of fear this time. Out of revulsion. The crowd dispersed slowly, conversations continuing in hushed, excited tones. Alara remained standing in front of the now empty locker, alone in the hallway. She felt him before she saw him. Lord Drackle stood at the far end of the corridor, partially concealed in shadow, watching. He didn't approach, didn't speak. Just offered the slightest nod of approval. Alara touched the obsidian pendant at her throat and allowed herself to smile, not the calculated expression she showed the world, but something genuine, something free. The weight she'd carried since arriving at Ravenscroft, the constant vigilance, the need to hide, the exhausting performance of invisibility, lifted like morning fog. She walked toward her father, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. "Now I finally get to enjoy high school," she said. Lord Drackle's smile was cold and proud. "Yes, child. Now you do." Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as intriguing as you can ever imagine. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next story.